I applied these prosthetics years ago, knowing that I always wanted to do a second look with them. I mean, these pieces did not come cheap.
I am never gonna financially recover from this.
But I was impatient removing it, which caused damage, and then proceeded to store it really poorly. The pain! Which led to more damage. So we got our work cut out for us. I'm designing this whole thing as I go, but I do know that I don't want this look just to be a white version of the original. And I definitely want some cool icy spikes. So let's start with those. Using clear Worbla to make some long cones and fill them with iridescent film. Made a lot of different sizes because I knew I wanted to use these for the arms and the shoulders. Figured they would be easy enough to trim down for whatever I needed. It's a dragon, gotta have scales. Cut some out of vinyl in 3 different sizes. Found that adding a slight bend to it made them look more interesting. I also cut those same templates out of regular white EVA foam. Applied a glaze to give it a little shimmer because glitter makes everything better. Now let's build those armor pieces. The arm bracers are designed in 2 pieces. That way they'll be easy to get on. The larger piece has some elastic to give it some give, and that top panel will just Velcro right over top. Added the largest spikes, used a tab through the foam along with hot glue so I don't accidentally end up knocking these off. Time to cover it in scales, alternating different sizes. You can also go in and cover up that blunt edge of that top piece. Had this great scale fabric and wanted to use it as an underbelly effect. Now just finish blending with more scales. Use a template for a basic shoulder shape and added spikes just like the bracer. And back to just covering everything in scales. Now dragon look with my human hands seems kind of silly. I knew I wanted clear claws to go with that icy feel. I made them similar to the spikes with the film inside. Building all this on a glove, using cotton and latex to widen the fingertips. This makes them more creaturey and also gives me a surface to apply those claws on. Paint it all white, you guessed it, more scales. Hot glued the claws on, added some foam clay to help hold the claws and to smooth out the fingers. I cut different scales for the fingers and made sure to apply them at the joints so that way I could bend my fingers. Also left the palms free, that way it wouldn't limit my ability to move my hands. The first dragon look, I didn't bother with wings, but I actually had an idea this time. Bought a set of articulated wings. Figured I could just cut the fabric away and just add whatever I wanted. The frame only came in black, so did have to paint that white. That joint is an eyesore. Covered in spikes, careful not to mess up the range of movement. To fill the gaps, added some of that iridescent film and used scales to make it a lot more interesting. Also, since this fabric is sheer, you can still see the poles and it doesn't look that great, so used more of those scales to cover that up. Much nicer. Now I should have thought about this sooner, but that black elastic with all this white is not gonna work. So I ended up having to take it apart and swap out the elastic. The suit, I added more of that scale fabric and created belly scales with foam. For the smaller scales, I thought it would be better to apply it on a mesh fabric ahead of time, making it much easier to apply while I was wearing it, because trying to apply one scale at a time would have been a nightmare. Just a few more details, and you can definitely see there's a bit of inspiration from the original rainbow version seeping into this look. And those shoulder pieces will just go on with Velcro. Okay, now we have to tackle that face and really see how bad the damage is before we do anything else. Fix the jaw because that thing is holding on by a thread. In order to get this thing on, I'm gonna have to take the face off of the cowl. This is actually 3 prosthetics. The third one being the neck. The thing is, that piece is so thin, I'm not gonna be able to remove it. We're gonna have to get a little creative. Definitely didn't want to use where it's currently ripped. That means I'll be spending an hour just trying to clean up that seam once it's applied. Instead, we're gonna cut along the scales to hide the seam and just repair that original tear. Oh, if you have a really badly damaged prosthetic at home and you were hoping that I would go a little more detailed in how I fixed this whole mess.
With luck.
Don't worry, I got you. That's a whole other video. Lastly, just have to fix where those horns were because we're gonna use a different set. Now we can go in and just paint it all white. This did take a few coats to get everything covered. At this point, I just left it white and added some shimmer. I wasn't really sure how I wanted to paint it. 10 months passed by. When I finally picked it back up, the color from the original makeup had started to seep through that white. And here you can see how badly the blue is in particular. Let's fix that. Decided I wanted to keep the painting to a minimum, but you lose a lot of that nice texture with just this plain white. Did end up going in with some metallic light blue in between the scales so that detail can really pop. Sponged a super thin layer of pink in some areas just to give it the illusion that it was iridescent. Now for the next hurdle. Since this time, I am actually smaller, and this costume is way too loose. It's not easy just to sew it and take it in, plus I'm no seamstress. So we're gonna go with a new game plan, but also something fast because I don't wanna spend weeks building a new costume. Good news is the shoulders and the bracers are separate pieces. Decided on a dress to attach the shoulders to and make a corset out of EVA foam. Added some of that scale fabric to go with the arm bracers. Luckily, I still have some of those scales left over. Use them to decorate the bottoms and to hide the seams. I have these icy transfers from a previous look. They were barely seen in the look and I spent hours making these, so this is the perfect time to reuse them. Just added a little more rhinestones and painted some sparkle. Wanted to get the horns attached to the cowl. These are 3D printed. I ended up using some iridescent flakes over top because I liked the fact that they were a little translucent. Went to add the magnets to hold them in place, and last minute decided I wanted to incorporate white LEDs. So ran the wiring inside the cowl. Just have to connect them to a power source. Love any excuse to use LEDs. Finally, time for the makeup. Now this is the first time I have tried this on to see how the neck will fit. And in real time, you can see my claustrophobia kick in and I feel like I'm being strangled. I will admit I ended up stalling and taking much longer to glue stuff down in hopes I could try to mentally prepare myself. I made sure to check the lights because some of you know what happened last time. Now the thing with reusing pieces, the edges are never going to be in the original glory, no matter how well you remove it. And I realized the face is not gonna cover this problem area. So these edges did take a little extra latex to get them blended. The cowl needs a little more love at the neck. Ended up having to do a little surgery. That will do. Figured best to paint my chest before putting the face on. Wanted to continue the scales on the piece onto my skin, but something didn't feel right. Was trying to figure out what was wrong. Yeah, that's the wrong blue. Okay, let's reset and try that again with the right color. Also, a really good plan is for me to lean forward out of frame so you can't see any of this. With all the costume details, wanted to keep the chest fairly simple, just adding a little blue. A little sloppier than I would like. Dry brush some white over the sculpt to make it look like I actually know what I'm doing. Some sealer and glitter so it has some shine. Finally, time for the face. Luckily, this part went quite smooth. Tried to take my time so I wouldn't mess it up. I kind of wish the cheeks looked like this. Again, I thought it would be best to lean out of frame, but the mouth was painted. Scaleras are in, just have to finish the eyes. Home stretch. Airbrushing was, well, tricky, but we got there. Added some glitter around the eyes for some sparkle to tie it all in. It was nice to have working LEDs for my final look. And my heart just sank at that moment. But fear not, I guess the switch was not fully on, so we're all good. I used the teeth from the original dragon look. If you want a closer look on how those were made, or curious to check out the colorful metallic version of these pieces, be sure to head over to the next video.